Madbean Egghead is a smooth, relatively low-gain overdrive based on the Clark Gainster. I'm going to be demonstrating it through a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe recorded with a Red 5 RVD9 dynamic microphone straight in front of the speaker, combined with a couple of impulse responses. I'm going to be using a 1989 Fender USA Stratocaster Plus. As far as the controls go, there's not much explanation needed. You've got your volume, you've got your gain, you've got your presence. First of all, here's my clean tone. Now with the pedal engaged, with gain and presence at noon. Now to check out the gain side, first turning it down to 9 o'clock. And now with the gain turned up to 3 o'clock. And with the gain maxed out. Now to check out the presence, first turning that down to 9 o'clock. And up to 3 o'clock. And finally with the presence at max. All the components I used in this build are stock, as prescribed in the Madbean documentation. We have the option of using ceramic or mica caps on C2, and I believe I went with ceramic. How much this actually affects the sound would be debatable though. Now what caused some issues for me at the time was the size of the electrolytic capacitors. Since this build is supposed to fit into a small 5090A enclosure, you really need to make sure the size of your components is suitable for this type of build. Now the small board does not take a ton of components, and although I believe Madbean's statement that it only takes a few minutes to build in the documentation is a bit of an exaggeration, it's not a complicated board. The complications, however, come in when you start considering the small enclosure, as is often the case. Drilling has to be quite precise, and you should definitely look for small profile components, especially when it comes to electrolytics. As I mentioned before, the electrolytic at C8 turned out to be a problem for me. Although I do want to specify that that was my fault in the component selection, rather than Madbean's. But you know, it is something to look out for. This was one of my earlier builds, so I wasn't familiar enough with component sizes and stuff like that. The capacitor I had stuck out too much vertically, and I had already cut off the leads at the bottom, so I didn't have the option to bend those leads and the capacitor out of the way. I did have some room left in between the daughter board and the in and output jack where I could angle the board down a little. In the natural orientation, this didn't help enough and I still couldn't put the lid on. But if I turned the board 90 degrees, I could angle the side of the board with the electrolytic capacitor enough for that to fit in, and the other side of the board that was now sticking out had just enough give to fit in when I closed the lid. I made sure to pay extra attention to isolating all the boards, as well as the lid, with duct tape. It did end up looking pretty messy, and the off-board wiring is very awkward, but I do have a functional pedal, and really, what more could I ask for?